lunch breaks. So, okay, without further ado, I give the floor to Mr. Laurent Ruseckas, who has already collected the members of his panel to start. We have one online participant who is waiting for us, and hopefully you'll start. I have people outside weeping, everybody to join.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome once again. I'm Laurent Ruseckas, and I'm really delighted to be chairing this very esteemed panel to discuss a variety of issues related to European energy policy, energy security, resilience, and our panelists here, I don't have your names right, Gürkan Kumbaroğlu. He's the head of the Turkish Association for Energy Economics. We have Olga Khakova, who's with the Atlantic Council in Washington. We have the very esteemed Matt Bryza, who I was just telling Olga, we met for the first time I'm revealing how old we are, in 1996 in Baku. It's embarrassing, but I just admitted it. Matt Bryza, also with the Atlantic Council, former senior US diplomat on energy. And then Samuel Furfari, welcome. You're looming over all of us. Thank you very much. So I'm going to start with you, Olga, and I'd like to discuss the legacy of the 2022 crisis, which, when you look at European natural gas prices, we're obviously still, despite there being a new crisis having come along, we're still in the period following that 2022 crisis. I mean, what would you say about the legacy of that crisis and lessons learned or anything else?
Thanks so much. What a great way to kick off the discussion. I think, first of all, realizing and reminding ourselves that market fundamentals are now filtered through, like the supply and demand traditionally that would broadly drive where oil and gas goes around, following the price. Those market fundamentals are now filtered through geopolitical agendas and ambitions. One quick example you wanted to kick off from 2022, what are the lessons? Had Putin been purely motivated by financial gains, Russia today would actually be selling a lot, and I'm willing to bet a lot on this, a lot more money to Europe, and not just to Europe, but around the world through the existing gas pipelines and through massive expansion in LNG. So financially, on many different reasons, but particularly because of on the energy front, they would have been much better off. So that's one thing. The other lesson that we've learned from 2022 is that we can build things and we can get things done fast when we want to. When we have that overarching vision and there is clear explanation, to the citizens, to the nationalities, to the different players, and watching the public-private sector cooperation on that is just incredible. So I always think of 2022 as a really horrible, challenging time, a terrible beginning of a full-scale invasion, but also a reminder that we can come together and we can address some challenges pretty quickly. And how do we channel that energy, that attitude into facing whatever crises are coming our way?
Thank you. One of the most remarkable things that happened was Germany changing all of its permitting rules temporarily to build all this regas terminal infrastructure. And I thought after that, well, maybe all of Europe will just do this and permitting will go away as a problem. It has not happened. It was a kind of a one-off, unfortunately. But Matt, how about your view on this?
Yeah, thanks, Laurent. And Kostas and Paniota, all of you, this is the best discussion I've participated in or listened to on energy and the geopolitics and the market dynamics in as long as I can remember. And we only just began. Laurent, I'm glad you brought up Germany because for years, decades, going back to Ronald Reagan even, by the way, I won't go dwell on that too much, that's a long way back, the US government was trying to do what Olga was talking about, which is to help our European allies understand this inextricable link between overall security, whether it be energy, economic, physical security, and the market. And we are arguing, we think you are going to be, in Reagan times, too exposed on a single supplier with geopolitical ambitions for its natural gas supplies to you. And that continued through my time working on, when I met Laurent in the late 90s, working on the Caspian oil and gas pipelines from Azerbaijan, Georgia, into Turkey, and now onward to the EU. And our arguments were often met on deaf ears. So I remember shortly after the January 1st, 2006 cutoff by Russia of natural gas to Ukraine and the EU, I was dispatched to Berlin for a conversation with a deputy minister of economy, because it's economy and energy in the German government, and that's the portfolio. And the gentleman was really polite, and he listened to me, and he started squirming in his chair about 25 minutes into the conversation. And obviously I was making him uncomfortable trying to explain what I just said and what Olga said about security and market dynamics. And he finally said, very politely, he said, you know, Matthew, I think we need to end this conversation. I just don't know why an American official is telling European officials how they should structure their mix of natural gas imports. And I said, oh, okay, so I left and then reported dutifully back in Washington, and I received a question, not directly but indirectly, from President Bush at the time. And he said, why the heck should we care more about Europe's diversity of sources of supply and delivery routes, he didn't put it quite that clearly, but anyway, of natural gas into Europe, than they do? And I replied, Mr. President, because eventually this is going to come back and haunt us all, because Russia is going to use this dependence as leverage. So Germany is exactly the transformation that is kind of miraculous. They have led the way, as you said, Laurent, with the new permitting, with the LNG import terminals. And for the first time ever, it seems across the EU, there's been a strategic shift to understand the need to diversify sources of supply and transit routes, not only for geopolitical reasons, but also for market reasons. Will that hold? I don't know, because there are some backdoors that have been integrated into the gas transit system.
Thank you. Gürkan.
Yes, thank you. Picking up on Germany, it's miraculous indeed. We had the Nord Stream 2 pipeline even built, and then it turned out they cannot use it. Whatsoever, so I'd like to note that the 2022 shock crisis is different than today's, in that it stems from disruptions, that today's shock stems from disruptions to oil products, seaborne LNG flows, rather than pipeline gas from Russia. Whatsoever, the policy design issues are more or less the same, and then policy lessons remain relevant. So what are the policy rations from the 2022 shock? The way I see it, it's essentially 4 points. So filling up storage, right? And this came up by the meeting up of energy minister of the 27 EU countries several times. So in a sense, it's cooperation and solidarity that was successful. That's the way I see it. So filling up reserves, the decision to have it is 80% fill up by November 1, 90%, and then reducing demand. 15% demand reduction was agreed upon there. Diversifying energy supply. At the 2022 shock, both LNG and pipeline gas diversification was evident that we have observed. And finally, boosting renewables, boosting up renewables, enhanced targets to speed up the development.
Thank you. I'll come back to you on some of those, but I want to bring in Samuel on video. Where are you, in Geneva?
No, I'm in Brussels.
You're in Brussels. Okay, welcome.
I would have preferred to be with you in Athens, to meet so many friends, and especially the organizer, which I appreciate very much. But it's for logistic reasons that I'm not with you. And I'm pleased to meet also again my dear colleague Kumbaroğlu. It's a long time that we do not meet, Gürkan. We have a panel of brilliant people knowing the story. So I need to say the same thing, but with a different perspective. And I would like to start for what happened in the year 2000. The year 2000, the European Commission published a strategy paper on security of supply. And I was working at that time with the Vice President of the Commission, and I remember perfectly the strategy, 3 pillars. First of all, we need all type of energy, no taboo. We have no luxury to abandon one energy. Second pillar, not to depend too much from a country or a group of countries or an area. Third pillar, diversify the means to transport the energy where you need it. What have done Germany? They abandoned the first pillar because they say we do not want coal, we do not want nuclear, we want only renewable. So they destroyed the strategy. Second mistake, they depend too much on Russia, on gas. Very stupid idea to put all the eggs in the same basket. Third error, what you mentioned already, with no LNG terminal, a pipe passing by Ukraine, and a vulnerable pipe in the North Sea, in the Baltic Sea. So they destroyed completely their security of supply. The problem is that it's not only Germany which is paying for such ridiculous mistake. We pay whole because we created in the meantime, between 2000 and 2022, we have created a single market for electricity. So the drama for Germany is a drama for all the 27 member states. And nobody realized that it was just because we forgot the common sense strategy of security of supply. It's really incredible how we have been weak in our security of supply in the EU those last years.
Thank you. If I could stick with you, Samuel, and bring us to the current crisis. How would you assess the European policy reaction, whether at the member state level or the EU level, to the current crisis? Does it reflect anything that might have been learned? Obviously, you've mentioned how they forgot the report of 2000, but lessons learned from 2022. Have there been improvements?
Have you seen the reaction of the Commissioner for Energy, Mr. Dan Jorgensen? He suggests to take the public transportation instead of the cars. He suggests to reduce the temperature. We were in March. March is over for the winter. Reduce your temperature. So they are still refusing to see the reality. In the Commission in Brussels today, they are ignoring the drama that they have created with their decarbonization strategy. They put all the eggs in the same basket, decarbonization, and forget all the rest. And so we have a crisis.
So I mean, in the very short term, obviously you can't change the energy mix. Are you saying the EU should be doing more what Asia is doing, taking more aggressive steps to reduce gas consumption right now, or no?
Yeah, but it is not a solution. We will not reduce the gas consumption, of course not. It's ridiculous to say that we will reduce it. The more we want renewable energy, intermittent and variable electricity from wind and solar, the more you will need gas, because it's not with nuclear that we can follow the law, and coal is a taboo. So we need more gas, and the demand has to be there for gas. But look at what happens with Azerbaijan. Mrs. von der Leyen went to Baku during the crisis and said, we want more gas, but we are not ready to sign long-term contracts. So they asked Azerbaijan to invest billions for a new pipe or extending the capacity, but not sure that tomorrow we will buy the gas. So it's ridiculous. I think that the EU is continuing to make huge mistakes because they refuse to see the reality. They are still stuck with this vision, no more fuel, no more fossil fuel. This is a joke. Fossil fuel will not disappear, not even in the EU.
Okay, I'm going to push back on you a little bit. The EU doesn't buy gas, so it's been the private sector who has not stepped up and signed long-term agreements for additional Azerbaijani gas. Do you want the Commission to buy gas directly?
No, well, they can do that if they want, but this is not the problem. You know, the companies are not ready to sign long-term contract because the Commission keeps repeating, you should not have long-term contract because in a few years we will not use gas anymore. This is the official policy. The EU is keeping repeating zero fossil fuel. So who is going to sign long-term contract?
Fair enough. enough. Good point. Gürkan, back to you. Lessons learned, and also a little bit about demand. Because you mentioned this 2022 target, reduced demand by 15%. The Commission didn't do anything. Prices went up and demand went down. So you chalk that up as a victory, but I sort of see it as just normal market functioning.
Yeah, solidarity is important there. But I would like to pick up on Azerbaijan, as
Please.
Dr. Furfari mentioned in his last point. There is actually an existing pipeline, and there is no need to build up new pipeline there because the infrastructure is there. The Trans-Anatolian pipeline connected to the Trans-Adriatic pipeline coming to Greece, to Europe, with its 16 BCM annual capacity, can be upgraded with additional compression upgrades to double the capacity to 31 BCM. So I think that is a great opportunity. How to make that happen? That is the second question. Is it policymakers or is it the private sector? Because the private sector invests, as you say. But I think the marginal cost there is quite low, rather affordable. On the demand side, then, you're right. Efficiency is always the low-hanging fruit, and efficiency improvements are not that rapidly progressing. What I think is important with this crisis, what we have maybe missed in the first crisis, is to establish a fuel observatory. I mean, track on EU level all the demand and all the stock levels to be able to react quickly, to understand, to see the situation quickly. I think that's an important value added to establish a common fuel observatory in the European Union.
Thank you. Since Azerbaijan has come up, Matt Bryza's former U.S. ambassador to Azerbaijan, what's your view on this issue raised by Samuel?
Yeah, thanks. So many great
Gürkan?
points. It's like a child in a toy shop. Yeah, what do you respond to? It's so good. I completely agree with Samuel and with Gürkan. In my experiences in Azerbaijan, the country has committed to double exports of natural gas to Europe, or imports by Europe, by the end of next year. And there's no way it's going to happen because exactly for the reasons that were said. There have been conflicting signals from the European Commission about whether or not companies in Europe should be procuring natural gas into the future. So there hasn't been the upstream investment in Azerbaijan to produce the gas. There hasn't been either the investment in the expansion of the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. Its capacity, it's 16 BCM through the Trans-Anatolian pipeline, Azerbaijan across Georgia and Turkey. But then when you go from Turkey through Greece, Albania, under the Adriatic, and then to Italy, the capacity is 10 BCM. So it needs to double to 20 BCM, right, if Azerbaijan's going to meet that goal. And it has increased by just 1.2 BCM because there simply isn't the investment, because there's not the upstream investment. So nobody wants to invest in capacity that has no gas to put in it. So yeah, this is a real problem. And I think one last point is that Europe really does need to work through this political question of how much to emphasize renewables and how much to emphasize gas as a transition fuel. In Bulgaria, I served on the board of the biggest private natural gas company in Bulgaria for a while called Overgas. And what we struggled with was this ridiculous situation where gas consumption in Bulgaria went from 7 BCM, like in 1993, down to now just 3 BCM. Whereas here in Greece, in 1993, there was 0 natural gas consumption, and now it's about 10 BCM. And the air is much cleaner. In Bulgaria, the fact or the lack of reliance on natural gas isn't going into a shift toward renewables, it's continued reliance on coal. And the coal industry in Bulgaria is heavily subsidized, corrupt as heck, right? Controlled by people inside the government, before this government at least, who know how to use the system to perpetuate the flows of revenues. It's 20% efficient. So if primary energy source is coal in Bulgaria, what you get out of it at the end is 20% electricity, so 80% losses. Incredibly inefficient. Natural gas is what the country really could increase its supply of, yes, working with Azerbaijan and others, but it's not doing it. It's not doing it. And so if the European Union is starting to understand that, and there's a need then to lean on this new Bulgarian government with potentially some reformist credentials to clean up, literally and figuratively, the energy sector to focus more on gas rather than coal, and a lot of the gas could come from Azerbaijan.
Matt, just a quick point. You mentioned the upstream of the Trans-Adriatic.
Yeah.
I think there were several discoveries in recent years in the Caspian. So the gas is there.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's deep Azeri there's Absheron. Yeah, it's out there. It's discovered. You just need to put the money in to get it out. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Olga, I'm sure you have thoughts picking up on this discussion.
Oh, yes. First of all, Azerbaijan. The elephant in the room is that some of the gas coming from Azerbaijan is not Azeri gas, it's Russian gas. And I do fully support the idea in investments and collaboration around actually further investments in gas development in the region where Azerbaijan can benefit from that at the national level. That's the only thing that's going to drive this. And people of Azerbaijan and the region are going to benefit versus Russia, just lining its pockets again and reinvesting the money into aggression across the world. So this is something that we really need to talk about. And if we don't have the transparency, we don't have good numbers to say, all right, fine. The reality is this is how much is coming from Russia. This is how much is Azeri gas. Then it's really hard for us to then shift and say, what is the goal? How much can we invest in the development? And the other, talk about the market signals on the other side. Yes, it's not just renewable goals. It's how serious is Europe about reaching, meeting its legislation. We have unprecedented legislation in place by 2027, phase out of Russian oil and gas. If you would have told anyone this 5 years ago, I think people, any of the energy analysts or just an average person would have just laughed you out of the room to said, there is no physical way for an energy structure in Europe to change this much just in 5 years. That is how big of a massive change Europe has undergone. So we need to take the time to appreciate that. At the same time, the economic pressures today, economics always kind of weigh down in terms of any political aspirations or any really great targets. In the end of the day, the economics will keep weighing that down. And economics at the national level in democratic societies will eventually win over. And so if the leader is not in a democratic society, if the leader is not responding to where the economics is pulling, then we've seen some changes even this year. I mean, look at Hungary, look at other places where there was a mismatch in terms of, it wasn't in Hungarian discussion, wasn't about Ukraine, it was about what people wanted a vision that was, economic prosperity versus not. So going back to Azerbaijan, going back to that conversation, if we are serious about Europe meeting the 2027 targets, sending that goal that there isn't going to be a relapse because of the current crisis, because of the potential deindustrialization, because of whether some industries are impacted heavier than others, like chemicals, in other industries that have 40-50% of their costs be energy costs. That is a huge driver to either shut down operations or relocate somewhere else. So really thinking about how realistic are we about not relapsing back to Russian supplies, and then not just sending signals to Azerbaijan, but to other countries in the region, including the Caspian, just the broader region, and in countries like Greece, sending a clear signal that you can develop because we're not going back. That's a clear market signal right there.
Thank you. I have to note that Europe getting off Russian gas was made much easier because 80% of it was done by Putin cutting the gas. So we're talking about the last 20% here. With Azerbaijani gas, I'm just going to push back a little bit. Azerbaijan maybe from time to time importing some Russian molecules doesn't mean it's because Shakhtini's, that gas is fully contracted. Shakhtini's phase 2 is all going to Europe. You can have custody through the chain, and that's that.
Right, but I think if we talk about expansion, where that expansion comes from, I think maybe that's a different way to talk about it.
Well, where this is a concern, and Matt, I'll turn to you now, is in terms of, so the regulation on Russian gas phase out is on the books. It's very clear. The dates are clear. I don't think anyone's going to open that up and start tinkering with it because that's a very painful process, and that you doing anything in the EU is painful and difficult. But Matt, what about having non-Russian gas, but maybe it is kind of Russian gas coming through after 2027. And I point this out, the minister mentioned that in a way I haven't heard before this morning, that what he said, remind everyone, he said, in the market, people think gas will continue to flow through Turk Stream and up through Bulgaria and onto Hungary after November 1st, 2027. But it won't be officially Russian gas. He didn't say it, but it might be Russian gas. What do you think about this, Matt?
Yeah.
I know it's a topic you're on top of.
Oh, it's something I've really struggled with or been mad about, yeah. And by the way, just for a second, in Azerbaijan, yeah, I agree with Olga. Like, the trading companies, they couldn't care less where the molecules come from. They're happy if they come from Russia. But I agree with Laurent that the overwhelming share of the gas flowing westward from Azerbaijan is produced in Azerbaijan. And the next phase for Azerbaijan is an interconnector, not the big Trans-Caspian pipeline, but the interconnector from Block 1 in Turkmenistan offshore Caspian into the existing Azeri-Shirag initially infrastructure. But leave that aside for now. Yeah, so there was a so-called secret agreement that was disclosed between, and Gürkan knows about this, I'm sure, BOTAŞ, so the state gas monopoly in Turkey, and Bulgargas, which is a counterpart in Bulgaria, though Bulgargas doesn't necessarily control the pipelines because Bulgartransgas does, but at the end of the day, they're one and the same. And that agreement was curious because it was secret. And he even had a secret protocol, not called Molotov-Ribbentrop, but maybe sort of similar, which said that Bulgargas and Bulgartransgas were obligated to receive whatever volume of gas BOTAŞ nominated. This would be LNG coming in, often mostly U.S. LNG, into the Turkish regasification terminals. So Bulgartransgas would have to transport whatever volume came in without knowing what the destination was. That's the weird thing. That was a secret clause. Without knowing the destination. Why in the world would anyone demand that the Bulgarian pipeline company agree to transit gas, and by the way, subsidize the pipeline without Bulgaria really receiving any gas from it? Why would you disclose or not disclose the destination if that was something that could be discussed transparently? And so the European Commission, with some help from others, got onto this and has now pushed back very hard and said this clause constitutes a backdoor for Russian gas into the European Union after 2027. There's one more piece that's crucial. When President Erdogan and President Putin last met in Turkey, they gave a press conference talking about and touting a Turkish hub for natural gas. That's how the Turkish government talks about it. I swear what Putin said, I mean, I listened to it in Russian and it was translated differently, was a Turkish hub for Russian natural gas. So since you and I have known each other, Laurent, the Russian side has wanted to stick itself in somewhere, insert itself into that east-west corridor for natural gas and have some sort of a controlling role. I believe that's what it wants to use the Turkish natural gas hub to do, and then use the secret protocol whereby the Bulgarian entity is obligated to send that gas anywhere, regardless of its EU commitments. The good news is I also believe the Turkish government is onto this as well and is trying to find a way to resist Putin's ambition while going ahead with some lucrative contracts.
Gürkan. Erdogan, Putin, BOTAŞ, Gazprom. Can you elucidate more on what Matt was mentioning?
I mean, as Matt has pointed out, these agreements are kept secret. They are called like commercial agreements. From time to time, not that special one, several different agreements. I wanted to get a copy of, no, they don't share it. It's very secret, all the agreements they make. So in my opinion, it's unfortunate. I would prefer having transparency. But even if it's Azerbaijani gas or any other gas, they keep it confidential. BOTAŞ itself has been in the process of privatization, as you know, but subsidies, in a sense, prevent that. Whatsoever, so Turkey has been arguing on the vision of establishing a regional gas hub. And gas hub, I mean, Turkey is a transit country where gas from different sources come from. Gas from the Middle East, gas from the Caspian, and Russia as well. That's right, Turk Stream. I remember this. It was not translated as HAP for Russian gas. Interesting that the Russian version is called like that. But the idea is to have gas-to-gas competition and competitive pricing in the HAP. But if there are sensitivities, you're right, there needs to be traceability. You need to track the origin of the gas. I think this vision continues, and Turkey is keen on establishing a gas hub. But that needs collaboration with Europe as well, the demand side. And I think it would be a win-win opportunity having collaboration with Greece, with the European Union, with Bulgaria. I mean, the first entry points, mentioning as Greece and Bulgaria in particular, it would be an advantage for the gas market and for all players, provided that there is transparency and there is trackability.
Thanks. I'm going to change gears and go back to Samuel. First, I'd just like to say on this, I mean, right now we're in crisis mode because of the outage of the Strait of Hormuz. By November 2027, I mean, heaven forbid if the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, then we'll be in another planet entirely. But by that time, assuming normal services returned, I don't think there's going to be a lot of pressure there. And I mean, the EU has kind of punted on Stranja 1, which is a smaller connection between Turkey and Bulgaria, where they don't seem to even have the idea of monitoring where those molecules come from. Right, okay. Stranja 2 is the big one, though. That's Turkstream. And that one, there's a dedicated pipeline that goes from Turkstream landing point in Turkey to the Bulgarian border. Unless BOTAŞ starts investing hundreds of millions of dollars connecting that, it's Russian molecule. So I don't see the EU saying never mind to that. But anyway, Samuel, you've talked a bit about some critiques of EU energy policy. I mean, set aside the decarbonization, or actually don't set aside. The EU is now going through a process, has been going through a process since the new commission came in at the end of 2024, of trying to implement, to a certain extent, suggestions of the Draghi report to reduce the burdens on European industry. A lot of it's not about energy, some of it is. How do you see that going? Do you see the EU doing some sort of policy reset that is going to be meaningful, or are you skeptical?
First of all, not to be misunderstood, I want to explain that I've worked 36 years in the Directorate General Energy of the European Commission. And I work until the last day because I'm profoundly convinced of the need that we have a strong EU. So my criticism is not to be misunderstood. I want a strong EU also in the energy policy. And it is what we have done until 2016-17. And then we changed completely. I would like to remind you, because I didn't thought to mention that, but the previous discussion remind me that Jean-Claude Juncker, the commissioner president before Mrs. von der Leyen, was creating a complete network, the motorway of gas, to be sure that any molecule of gas entering into the EU can cross and go the other part of the EU. And we were financing that with the interconnection program, the PCI, Project of Common Interest. Our vision was not to exclude Russia, but not to leave Russia completely controlling the gas system. And we were working with many other countries to try to push more gas into the EU. Then arrived Mrs. von der Leyen, and she dropped completely this strategy. It is why we have a difficulty today. So it's recent, this willingness to abandon gas, really recent. Before that, the EU was serious, and we were working with many countries. And I remember perfectly that we were saying that all the EU is surrounded by gas. You start from Norway, and you go to Latin America, and you pass by the Middle East, Central Asia. So gas is available. We need a change of vision. And I would like to maybe correct what you have said, because you say that we cannot dream that this will change. It will change because this is not sustainable. What we have today in the EU is not sustainable. We are destroying all manufacturing industry. We are expatriating all industry, and more than all, we have destroyed our chemical industry. The chemical industry is born in the EU, particularly in Germany, and we have killed everything. And for the shareholder, it's not a problem. They go to China, they go to India, and they get more money. But for SME and for worker, this is a disaster. So everybody except the Greens know and have understood. The problem is that Mrs. von der Leyen do not want to lose the face, because she have insisted so much during the first mandate, green, 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 and so she is blocked. And I believe one of the only things that she have made really is to abandon the word green energy and replace it by clean energy. Well, this is a joke. You know, the Prime Minister of Belgium, Mr. Bart de Wever, is also, or was also for a long time, the mayor of Antwerpen. Antwerpen is the second petrochemical pole in the world after Houston. And he's very much worried that this will disappear or being put under pressure. So he called a meeting 3 years ago saying we cannot destroy our chemical industry in Europe. He repeated a second time, and this year it was the third time. 3 times he called this meeting on the to save chemical industry. Have you seen coming something from the Commission? No. It is why I believe that the Parliament will take the lead now, and one day they will say, stop, it's enough. We cannot continue to destroy our economy, especially when the other take advantage, because you can be sure that the other are very pleased that we kill our industry, and particularly our chemical industry. So I believe that we are going to revise the situation. Maybe after Mr. Macron leave the presidency, French presidency, because he's one of the major actors of that. So 1 year to go, and then maybe the things will change.
Thank you. So something that's not sustainable will not be sustained, basically. So yeah, good, strong, powerful point. Olga, we're going to wrap up, conscious of time here, but Olga, I'll just ask you on EU policy, where you see it going, and if you want to say something about the EU methane regulation, you could.
Sure, I think it's a really great example of, over-focusing on the bureaucratic burden and losing sight of the end goal. I think the future is a more efficient gas system. The future is where methane emissions are minimized, but to take 2 steps back and ask ourselves, is this structure, the way this legislation is done? And this is always seen as, it's US criticism of coming into Europe and criticizing and telling Europe to deregulate. No, the criticism is coming within Europe. Equinor, one of the leading European renewable, a company that went from oil and gas and genuinely diversified into a robust, successful renewables giant in Europe, is the one saying, like, look, we need to still focus on the goal. The goal is right, but how we're getting there is wrong. And this goes back to the broader discussion. We talked about developments in Europe, and the earlier panels, from government officials in US and Europe talked about the importance of regulatory, predictability, stability, understanding how regulations will be implemented. That's one side of the piece. And methane regulations is such a visceral example. Now, we have enough crisis, we have enough volatility in the world. Why are we creating additional volatility for ourselves? Let's focus on the goal, but let's make it easy to reach the goal.
Yeah, important point. I think the fact that it's the Trump administration makes people in Europe think it's just the Trump administration complaining because they don't like climate. No, well, any US administration and any US companies would be complaining. We're running out of time. I'm going to bring you back in, Gürkan, ask you, resilience was one of the themes of this panel. If you could have some final words, and then Matt, I'll have you wrap up on, but I'd ask you about what does resilience mean for the EU and how's it going?
So resilience is the ability to quickly adapt to and recover from shocks. So adaptability and recoverability are the 2 key issues. And in terms of the resilience, here in this last shock, focusing on energy. By the way, it's not only energy with the Strait Hormuz. It's fertilizer prices are increasing as well, and the economic growth for the EU has been downgraded for 2026 from 1.4 to 1.1%. So there's it all affects consumer prices. It's a larger impact, but we're focusing on energy here. We've talked about this. Diversifying the energy mix is number one. Decentralizing generation for resilience, I think, is also an important issue. Of course, improving the infrastructure, what we've all been talking about, and then maybe implementing smart grids that also reduce then demand. Cybersecurity today is important, enhancing cybersecurity, and other cross-sector considerations, policy considerations. That all is a bundle, a package to achieve resilience.
Thank you. Okay, Matt, I'm going to subcontract to you the difficult job of wrapping it up.
Thank you. Wow. Okay, so a lot of negative news. That's what we're here for, right? To identify where things are off track. But there's a lot of really good news, too. Neptune. Unbelievably good news story in the Black Sea. Sakarya, Turkey's natural gas discoveries, the biggest in the history of the Black Sea. Diversified sources of supply are here in southeastern Europe, in those two places, and now there's going to be exploration, hopefully successful, right, off the west coast of Greece, all the way down to Crete. So diversified sources of supply here in this part of Europe are possible, are coming. Diversified transit routes. We talked about the vertical corridor. Fantastic. We talked about, you talked about the old Western line and the 3 BCM interconnection, Stranja 1, Stranja 2. We're shining a light on the need for there to be transparency. At the end of the day, the key is the market and the politics have to align, and they won't because of corruption if there's not transparency. Final point, Samuel, those natural gas interconnectors that the EU put in place under Juncker, that was fantastic. Those were projects of common interest, funded by the EU because they weren't commercially viable at the time. Thank God for them, because if they didn't exist, no matter how much LNG was imported through Germany and elsewhere, it wouldn't have gone where it needed to go in Europe based on price signals rather than monopoly power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of my speakers, including Samuel. Thank you for dialing in and joining us today. We really appreciate your remarks. Gürkan, Olga, and Matt. I'm afraid the global conference organization that requires every energy panel to mention AI, we have not mentioned AI. I will pay the fine out of my pocket. Thank you very much.
Check out the timing. Again, Laurent.